So my name is Laura, and I'm here to talk to you today about building community online and how to maximise our online connections as well. So first of all, we're just going to do a little bit about me. So that's me in the middle there, in case you couldn't tell. I have some pet rats, which I've written about in my little bio for this presentation, who are called Sven and Olaf, based on two characters from the film Frozen. I also have two dogs, two Labradors, which are family pets called Moses and Fergal. I also love reading and watching films such as Frozen, but to be honest, any Disney film, any rom-com, I'm quite easy with films. I also really love baking, baking the cakes, but also eating the cakes. So we've got a little cake there for that. I also love craft, so we've got some little craft utensils above my head there. An auntie, currently to three boys, three nephews, and one niece, more on the way. And I'm also chronically ill, which is a fun part about me that I will be talking more about in a bit. But that's it, me for now. So, why am I here? I have been asked to come and speak to you about building community because I set up a community called Youbelong back in January 2019, which has been set up for Christians or seekers with chronic illness and disability. As you can see, hopefully on our PowerPoint, we have got a website which is at the bottom with our logo in the middle. On the right-hand side, we've got our Facebook page, and on the left-hand side is our Twitter page. These are just random screenshots from a random day, just to kind of give you an example of what we're doing, where we're based. And on the right-hand side, on our Facebook page, you can see we are talking about Stronger, so advertising a little bit about today. I will come back to this and explain a bit more about Youbelong later, but that's it for now. So community is often a buzzword that is thrown around a lot, but actually it's interesting for us to look at what the definition really is. So I looked it up in a dictionary, an online dictionary. I'm not so old school as that, to use a book, although I love reading. But yes, the definition is a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. You might be familiar with that term, or maybe it's something a bit new to you, but I definitely recommend thinking about that as we go through. So why community? I like being around people, but as you've probably experienced, some people are not so easy to get along with. Sometimes it's easier just to not bother about it, but we do need to think about why we're doing community. Simon Sinek is a TED speaker, and he's an author, and lots of other things that he does really well. And he gave us this quote, which is the most basic human desire is to feel like you belong. Fitting in is important. So even though it's not something we always feel like doing, I think all of us somewhere inside of us have this innate thing that we need to be belonging. Also, Jesus set up this really great thing of community. He established community with his 12 disciples and his friends. And he also set up this little thing called church that you might be familiar with, which is a great example of community as well, and something we're going to be talking about as we go through. So there are 5 types of community. The first one is an interest group. So the top left-hand corner, we've got 2 ladies doing some knitting, which is there to illustrate an interest group. So you could have lots of different interest groups. You could have a book club, you could have a knitting group, a craft group, a cars group, anything like that. Anything where people have the same interests that they have in common, and that's what brings them together as community. Another one is action or change. And top right-hand corner, we've got the kids want climate justice. So they're obviously out protesting and marching for climate change. And climate change is something that this group have brought together to advocate for. And it's that interest in making change happen that's brought them together as a community. In the bottom left, we've got some pictures of some houses, which illustrate a place or a location. And unfortunately, often nowadays, our locational communities, our neighbourhoods and streets are not as close with each other or with our neighbours as we once were. Some of lockdown, I think, has helped bring us together to help serve each other's needs and things like that. But even if we're not that close, we have this thing in common because we live within the same area as each other. On our right-hand corner, we've got practice or professional. So I live in a rural area, and so the first thing that came to mind for me was the farming community. Not a fan of driving around behind lots of tractors all the time, but they're a great community. You also have the law community, the medical community, office workers community. The thing that brings them together is that they all have this same career, this same work path. And finally, we have circumstance. So right in the middle of our picture, we have a picture of some people in a flooded area. Unfortunately, they've been brought together as a community because they're all experiencing flooding. It's not something that's obviously a nice way of being brought together. You could also have a bereavement group or something like that. But although they don't have a particularly nice way that's brought them together, there are going to be good things that come out of that. Hopefully, they're going to get to know one another and help one another. And so, yeah, it's that that's brought them together. So, how is community built offline? I know we're talking about online community building, but I do think that it might be helpful for us to think about offline community building and then see how it works online from there. So our first example, as you can see, is a picture of some dogs, and this is a true story taken from an area in which there are some neighbours who have lived in the same place for many, many years. Some of them have got dogs, and they often see one another walking past the window with their dogs. And sometimes they say hi if they're walking together, and the dogs would sniff one another and say hi to them too. But that was kind of it. There was no community spirit there. So one day, one or two of the neighbours got together and they said, right, okay, let's find a way for us to gather. A lot of us have dogs. Let's arrange to meet at the dog park. And so they leafleted all the doors and they got together one day and met up. And all the dogs met each other and the people met each other. And they realised they had a lot more in common, not just the places they lived, not just their dogs, but lots of other stuff too. And so it was their dogs that brought them together. But then they spent lots of time together afterwards with regular meetups and coffee at one another's home. So in case you weren't sure, this is an interest or that kind of thing group. So before I begin this one, if you think you can guess what kind of group this is I'm going to talk about, leave a little message in the chat for me. So this group is about some people who lived in an area next door to one another again. And they realised that as they've been living there, the roads outside their house had got bigger and bigger, the cars outside had got bigger in number, and also the speed they were going had increased. And the people in the area didn't feel safe living there anymore. So one person who realised this put a notice through to the transport people, who looked at it and said that this couldn't take priority right now. They didn't have the money, and so they said, sorry, but we can't do anything. That person wasn't happy with that, and probably rightly so. They were worried about themselves walking around and their children going to school, things like that. So they gathered up other people in their area who all signed a petition. They wrote letters together and sent them off again. And this time they sent them to the council, who then spoke to the transport group, and they actually made this happen, and the change occurred. Here's a second for you to have a think what kind of group that category might be in. Okay, so you might have guessed, maybe you just on the right, that's absolutely fine. It's a social or action change group because they gather together purely because of their interest in wanting change to occur. Okay, so can this be translated online? Yes. So the dog group, for example, if that had all happened during lockdown and they weren't able to gather with one another in a small space, potentially they could have arranged a Zoom group and done it that way. Their dogs could have been on camera. They could have talked about toe clippings and like nails and things like that, and grooming and whatever, and they could have gathered that way. They also could have done it with the other group, the social action group, who could have made a Facebook group and done it that way, and then created an online petition, which also would have worked. So yes, it can happen, but the but is there. So you might have been familiar with, obviously, when everybody went into lockdown, church buildings had to close as well. And this meant that they had to think really, really quickly about what they were going to do next. A lot of them very, very quickly did a really great job of putting their services online, whether that was live streaming or recording and putting them out that way. And it was great. But over time, we've all realised that that doesn't really bring together community. So a lot of people have made changes and worked around that and found ways to get around that to build and develop community through the church. And you might be familiar with a few of these ways I'm going to talk about, but I will go through them all just in case there's something that's new to you that might be helpful. So the first one is Facebook. Facebook has two things. It has pages and it has groups. And as a community, you can use both of these. There's a lady called Nona Naomi Jones, who talks about all this, and she's involved in the Facebook relations team and things like that to do with faith and marketing. And she talks about all this stuff much better than I can. But one thing I did want to make sure you were clear on is that Facebook pages are great as a front door. They're great for sharing information and advertising events and things like that. But for building community, you really want to be using a Facebook group because it's a space that people can share a bit more intimately, only with people who they kind of know and people in the community and in their church, if that's the layout and the situation. And it just feels a bit more safe and comfortable, and people can get to know one another in that way. We do also have Twitter, which I haven't included here. Some people do find it to be really great, and I love Twitter. I use it a lot. But it's not that great at doing community because it only has the front page option. It doesn't have the group setting where you can bring together a few people in a small, closed, secure area. Matt has just said that he's currently reading Nona's book, Social Media to Social Ministry. That's the one. Yeah, that is a great book. I'd recommend it. Okay, so next is Zoom. I imagine a lot of you are familiar with this. If you weren't before all this lockdown and everything happened, you probably are now because a lot of people are using it. And it is really great, especially for making that face-to-face contact that you wouldn't obviously get in other places because you can't see one another, you can't really get a sense of personalities and things like that. So yeah, Zoom can be really, really good for that kind of thing, for making it feel a little bit more like you're actually with one another. There are downsides. Some people don't feel comfortable using it because of the webcam. They don't really want to be seen by people. But you can turn webcams off and things like that. You can use the phone to join a meeting. It's a really great place to use as part of your community building. Another one is YouTube. If you have been involved in church services or watched any of them, they may well have been uploaded to YouTube. And YouTube can be really great for this. As I said before, it can restrict the community. However, if you upload a YouTube video service, but you do it on Premiere version rather than just a simple upload, it comes up and it's set at an opening time where everyone can meet together, gather together at the same time to watch the same thing at the same pace. And there's even a chat box so people can discuss and answer questions and things like that, like we're doing now. And it makes the church really much more interactive and community focused. It's something that I've really realised, and maybe you have too, that a lot of people really enjoy that kind of church service or any other event. And I really hope that maybe church will become a little bit more like this in the future when we're in person as well as online, just because I feel like it brings the community together much better. The next one is WhatsApp. This is newer to some people and to others. It's often thought of as like the teen thing, but it's actually older people are using it now. And it's really great. It works like a text message service in some ways where you can just send a message to somebody else if you have their number. But you can also create groups of people. So like you would on the Facebook group, you can have everybody in the same place together, only people whose numbers you have. And if everyone agrees to giving their their phone number for public use in this way, but then you can have conversations and everybody else can follow on the conversation. You can do prayer requests and discuss things, and it's really, really great for things like that. And finally, email, which is really great because especially for a lot of older people, which many of our church congregations consist of, they might hopefully be able to use this if nothing else. And although it is sort of set up in a professional way, there are ways of using it to build community as well. So you can do bulk email, where you can just send one email to every single person in a group that you've set up. But then you can also then make an email chain where, once again, everyone's emails need to be given with permission and that they can be shared with everybody else in that group. But once everybody's in there, they can see everybody else's replies, and it just creates a chain of emails. So if somebody could put in a request for some help because their boiler's broken, and somebody else might reply and say, I'm really sorry, I don't have one, but here's a prayer for that situation. And then someone else can say, oh, actually, I've got one. How can I get it to you? So everybody can see what's happening. They know when someone's got what they need, and they can do prayer requests, and everybody can see it. So email works really well, even though it's a little old-fashioned. It can be good for some groups. So this little person here is illustrating what could happen If you try and use all these platforms at once, it's just not really feasible for one person to manage all of these things together. So what you need to do is to think about what works best for you and your community. Start with one or two places, and if you can add more later on, then do, if it feels like the right thing to do. And if someone else joins your group and is able to take on some of that work, hand something over to them, and then you can take on something else. But just try not to be balancing too many plates at the same time. So why are you building your community? You need to think about this to be able to know what platforms to use, which places to go, and probably a good place to go to is thinking back to your main vision or mission statement that you created. And if you haven't got one, then to come up with something. Your why can't just be I'm online because the pandemic made me do so. You need to have more purpose than that. So thinking back to your why will really help you to know what platforms are good. Another question to think about is your who. So here, in case you can't read it, we've got Anita who's pointing to her label sticker, and I think that's Robert on the other side, and they're just trying to find out who's who. If you've got an established church already, you can very easily probably get information if you haven't already about them, to find out a little bit more about them, maybe what their interests are, their age, their abilities, their family setup, because all these kinds of things can help you to know what methods are going to be right. For example, if you know the majority of your congregation and community are people who are over 70, they're unlikely to be able to use some other platforms, so maybe you would start with email and then see where it goes. So yes, your why is just as important, but your who and is also important. The next question is when. There's lots of different things when it comes to when. First of all, when is important when you're thinking about the platforms you're using. Some platforms have times where engagement is really high and sometimes when engagement is really low. So if you're trying to attract lots of people, particularly on Twitter, posting on Wednesday at midday is a great thing. Posting at Friday at 7 o'clock in the evening is probably not going to get you a whole lot of communication back. So knowing those things is really important. Also, knowing, again, goes back to your who, knowing who's getting involved, because this will affect your when. If your community is mostly made up of working people, office workers who work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, there's probably not much point in putting an event on Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because they're just not going to be able to be there. So that's really important when you're thinking about your when and your who at the same time. And finally, remembering that community as church in particular is not Sunday only. It needs to be throughout the week. That's not saying you need to be contactable 24/7, but you need to have different platforms with different people engaging throughout the week, not just having a Sunday service. Jesus and the first church weren't like this. They met on a Sunday or a Saturday for their main worship service, but they gathered for lunch in somebody's house on a Wednesday, had prayer meetings and served people and all kinds of things throughout the week. It wasn't just a Sunday only thing. So back to me, or rather Youbelong, again to tell you a little bit more about why I'm here talking to you. So as I said, I started something called Youbelong, which is a community online for people with chronic illness and disability, and I set it up in January 2019. I like to say that I was doing this online thing before it was cool. I wasn't the first one, but before everyone else jumped on this bandwagon. But yeah, so our aim is that all people with a chronic illness or disability will be able to access and fully belong to a worshipping community of their choice. We have 3 steps that we're aiming to get there. We hope to establish an accessible online worshipping community. We hope to advocate for the disabled and chronically ill community. And we hope to equip the local church to be fully inclusive of the chronically ill and disabled community. So this is our situation and why I'm here talking to you, what we're doing. This is our now. We are 2 years into this and we still feel like we're in the early stages. We've got so much that we hope to do and plan to do. So these things might change slightly over time, but that's kind of our focus at the moment. So I'm going to talk to you about Youbelong as a case study. And we're going to look at some of the things that I've spoken to you about, our why, our who, our when, in terms of Youbelong to make it make a little bit more sense with you. So first of all, our why. My own experience of loneliness and exclusion from church led me to set up Youbelong. I realised that I was struggling with church because I wasn't able to access it frequently. I couldn't connect in with other people in the community who were like me because there were very few. And I realised that I was not the only one in this situation. So I set up Youbelong for that reason. Our Who are Christians and seekers of all ages with chronic illness and or disability who are not able to access or who do not feel included and welcomed into another church. So we do have people in our community who access other churches elsewhere and then come to us for some parts and churches for other parts, and that's absolutely fine. We're here just to fill the gap for people who are unable to feel welcomed and belong somewhere else. And our When the community work together to be available for prayer and support and all kinds of other activities and events are running throughout the week. We don't currently have a Sunday service. We may never have. I just don't know at the moment. But it's all about being available to each other throughout the week. So I might not be able to reply to something, but you can guarantee if someone puts a prayer request out on our Twitter page or our Facebook page, that someone else will reply and support them and pray with them and do whatever else is needed. Where? So we have a few now, but it's taken a couple of years to get here. First of all, our Facebook page and our Twitter page. So as I said before, these are like the front doors. They're there to share information, to reach new people. We can raise awareness and advocate on behalf of the chronically ill and disabled community, but it's very much of a shallow level kind of thing. Then we have our Facebook group, which we use to share information about Youbelong, advocate, and to be a place to chat also. But we also support each other as a community and we share encouraging Bible verses or prayer requests. We chat about what we're doing in the week. And it's just a nice, comfortable, private, secure space for us to talk without being interrupted by the outside world and without everything that we're talking about being exposed. You wouldn't want to have random people on the road coming into your small community meeting if you were meeting in public, and it's kind of the same thing. It's not completely exclusive. If people want to join, then we'll let them in. But it is just a nice place for the community to meet. Then we have email. Once again, this is a bit of a shallow level thing. It's used to share updates, and we have our Bible study notes that go out fortnightly to people who are involved and interested in those. And we also then update members just on our sort of activities and upcoming events and things like that. WhatsApp is very new. I've been using it personally for a little while, but it's new for Youbelong. We've actually brought it in for our book club, which is also new. And it's been a great way for us to discuss our book and to just ask each other questions about what we've been thinking, any thoughts we've had, maybe sharing our own personal situations in relation to the person in the book talking about things. And I feel like it's really brought us together as a really nice community. And I've really enjoyed doing that. So hopefully we'll be doing more stuff with WhatsApp in the future. And finally, we have Zoom. We use Zoom at the moment for gathering for our craft group and our Bible journaling group. And we have just like various chats, sometimes one-to-one, sometimes just in small groups for coffee. And again, it's really nice because you can see people face-to-face and feel like you're really sat in a room with one another. And I really enjoy that because you get to see people's faces. Sometimes Twitter and Facebook, you just have an avatar or a picture of someone's pet. You don't get to know someone personally and get their personality and things like that. So yeah, Zoom can be really great for that. As a disabled community, we do realise that we're leaving out quite a majority of our group purely because the deaf community are unable to be connected because we don't have a BSL interpreter or a way to do subtitles and things like that. So we're working on that, but Zoom can be really useful for lots of things. So I have some notes for this part because I wrote them down last night. So I thought it'd be really interesting for me to think back through my experience of Youbelong and to share it with you with what went well and some of the challenges and things that I had. I didn't actually mean to set up Youbelong. Might sound strange. It wasn't something I set out to do. I felt called to do it and it randomly just happened and it has escalated and turned into what an amazing thing it is now. So I didn't know what I was doing. So I've learned a lot and hopefully I have some things that I can share with you that you'll find helpful too. So first of all, doing research and watching and listening to other people who have been there and done it. Youbelong is quite unique in some ways, but there are various things that have been done before. So although online church, I like to pretend that I was one of the first ones there. Actually, online church has been going for 20, 25, 30 years, but just with a much smaller population of people than there are now. So there are people to go to about that. There are also lots of disability advocates to go to, people who are better at social media than me. And watching and listening and researching all that kind of stuff has been really helpful for me in knowing what worked well and what didn't go so well and what I can implement. If someone else has already made those mistakes, there's no point in you making them again. Let them make them, learn from them, and then implement the changes. The next one is being flexible and being willing to adapt. I didn't know much more than my long-term goal, so the steps along the way weren't really important to me. If you're someone who's really fixed in your method, this can be difficult, but being able to listen to the people in your community, and if they make changes and suggestions for changes and adjustments, listen to them and bring them back to your leadership team or the rest of your community. Discuss them, don't just write them off straight away. There could be something really good in what they're saying. Number 3, or 5, don't worry, there's not too many. Adding gradually. So like I said with the paper plates or the man spinning the plates, don't go full on straight away. Start off with just 1 or 2 platforms, a small core group of people, and if there's interest, it will grow. You need to do the right things, publicize it, things like that. But just start small and see what you can manage and then build up as and when you can. Don't take on too much at once. Number 4 is to focus on individuals and getting to know your community. As I said, I've been doing Youbelong for 2 years now, almost. And since that time, I think we've got about 1,500, 1,700 people in total in our community across all the platforms. But I would say there's a very small percentage of those people that I knew at the start, and it's taken me a long time to get to know people. And the numbers really don't count. If your engagement with those people isn't there, it's not a community. It's just numbers. So focus on getting to know the people and building community, not just on the amount of people that you have. And finally, maybe the most obvious one, but maybe the hardest one, is trusting God. As I said, I didn't mean to do this. I didn't set up Youbelong as something that I plan to take on and do for the rest of my life, which now I can't imagine myself doing anything else. God put me here. He's given me the cues and given me the push and the guidance along the way. And so even when I feel incompetent, I feel like imposter syndrome is setting in. You need to just remember that God's put you here and you need to just trust Him. So then we've got, it feels very negative having a downward thumb, but as I had an upward thumb for the other one, it just felt like it made sense. So what were the challenges and things that I've learned along the way? So don't get distracted from your why. Don't get distracted from your community, from your people, from what you're doing and your purpose. Lots of things will come up along the way, admin and distractions and stuff like that. But you need to be focused on what you're doing and why you're doing it and keep straight on that path. It might be helpful to have people around you to be accountable to check in with every now and then just to make sure that the things you're doing are right in with what you're supposed to be doing. The next one is you can't please everybody, and that's okay, like I hate knowing that there might be people who don't like me or don't like what I'm doing, but nobody likes, there's nobody who is liked by everybody. And that's just the way it is. Like, not all our personality is going to be liked by everybody else. Not all of the things we're doing are going to be liked by everybody else. And it's okay. Just, focus again on your community, on the people who are liking and enjoying what you're doing, and just go along with them. Step 3, again, something that I've learned pretty recently, is it's okay to admit that you need help. It can be a lot. I love what I do so much, but it can be full on, and there can be lots of issues in the background that you're having to think about, whilst also portraying something that you want people to see online. Having help and stuff is okay. You don't need to be managing it by yourself. In fact, it's even better to have more people involved. More different inputs and experiences and points of view can only be a good thing. So if you need help, just ask for it, and hopefully, I'm sure God will put the right person in that space for you. Number 4, trialing things is okay. If you want to put something out, I know I really struggled with this. I wanted to be perfect. I'm such a perfectionist in life. I didn't want to fail. And putting some things out, you just have to trust that if it doesn't work, that's okay. Trial it, change it, do what you need to do, but get started. Put something out and be willing to adapt, change it if you need to. But trialing is okay. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time round. And finally, you can and you should take a break. Even God rested on the 7th day. Again, part of my perfectionism is I hate not being available and being there all the time. But we can't do our best if we're not well rested and taking care of ourselves. So it's important for us to rest as well. And honestly, the community get it. Like they rest too. And I'm sure they'll cut you some slack. And if they don't, I'm sorry, but you probably shouldn't listen to them in that way. Take a break, rest when you need to. Okay, so that's my 5 challenges, things I learnt. Finally, I've got some top tips for you. If you have any questions at this point, please do put them in Q&A, and I will come back to them after I finish this bit. If it's something to do with you personally, something you're currently working on, if not, I have got a contact slide right at the end. So if you're watching this later on, not live, please do use those things to contact me. So finally, my 5 top tips to build and maintain community. Do your research and your reading. Speak to people who have gone before and have experiences. Remember your why and your who. Go back to these if you're moving forward or making changes. Number 3 is to start small, beginning with a core group of people and just 1 or 2 platforms, and increase only if you feel it is needed or possible to do so. Number 4 is allow others to be experts too. There will be other people in your community who know more or are better equipped than you. For example, our Bible journaling group I'm a part of, but just as a participant, I'm not an expert in Bible journaling, but we have someone in our community who is great at it and she does a great job. She doesn't need me running it when she could do so much better, and honestly, I really enjoy listening and being part of it in that way. And finally, be open to feedback. Even ask for it. I know it's hard when you don't get something back that you wanted to hear, but it's really important in order to move forward. Bring your responses to your team and to your community and be willing to act on it if it is right. So that is me. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. If you have any thoughts or any questions, I would really love to see them and hear them. Any questions in the Q&A box would be great. And if not, thank you so much for listening and for watching. You can contact me in any of these places I've listed here. I hope you have a really great rest of your day. What has surprised you most in the Youbelong journey? Honestly, that it's happened. I didn't know that there were so many people like me. When I came into Youbelong and set it up, I just graduated from my ministry and theology degree. And at the time I'd finished, I was becoming more and more unwell, and I wasn't sure what I was going to use my degree for. I'd gone back to a regular office job, which was fine, but it wasn't something I was passionate about. And I realised that at this time that I'd have to give up my ministry passion. However, clearly God had different ideas for me, and so actually just even starting it was the biggest shock to me. The fact that I'm even here doing this, and that I've got so much support and so many lovely people in our community. I feel like I've just got hundreds of friends, and it's really, really lovely. So that's the thing that surprised me the most along the way. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Maybe I'll just finish with a prayer for anybody who is starting off on this journey. Dear God, thank you that you bring us together as community and you want us to be the community, to be your church in this world today. Thank you for all these new methods and techniques that we're using now for the online and digital world. They give us new opportunities to reach and connect with other people. I thank you for people who are taking that step of faith now in starting a community, whether online or in face-to-face real person contact when we're allowed. I thank you for all those amazing people and for giving us the gifts and skills that we need along the way. I pray that you bless everyone today who is hearing this, that they will have a great day and a great rest of their week. And I do pray for the rest of this stronger conference that you will look after everybody involved, give them the rest and energy that they need to get through this, and bless them for all their speakers and the talks that happen. Amen. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed that and I hope you found it helpful. And I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Have a great day.